want to give you a reminder, because it still is early in 2026. No spin means we don't pander, we don't propagandize, and we don't push ideology. That's what no spin means. It's like we try to analyze the news based on every possible fact we can accumulate. That separates us from almost everybody else, okay? Because most people have a preconceived, I'm going to say this because that's what my audience wants to hear. We don't do that, all right? And so when we're analyzing very important stories, like the rebellion that's going on now in the United States, we have to gather an enormous amount of information in order to make sense of it all. And I'll prove it again this evening, beginning with the talking points memo. So I wrote a column, posted on BillO'Reilly.com, filed it on Saturday, called The Rebellion. So there are 8 states that are rebelling against the federal government's immigration law. I will list them in a moment, okay? And what does that mean? It just means they refuse to obey the law. That's a rebellion. This is the sanctuary city movement, but it's more than that. Okay, so on Saturday, you saw one of those states, Minnesota, host a demonstration against the ICE shooting of last week. A couple of thousand people showed up, and there's nothing wrong with people protesting. That's what we do in America when we don't think something is wrong. But this protest was sponsored by a far-left group called the Minnesota Immigration Rights and Action Committee. This was an ideological protest, not an organic protest, okay? It was organized exclusively by the far left to seek people's presence on the far left. That's what this was all about. Okay. Authorities in Minneapolis arrested 29 people, and they were throwing chunks of ice and other debris at the local cops. Feds had no presence here. So a local demonstration, all right? And one police officer was hurt. That's the who, what, when, where, and why of the rally. The people who attended the rally are in one category. They are leftists who hate the Trump administration. Roll the tape.
It was another instance of someone in our city being killed, being murdered by law enforcement, and I'm ready to be done with it.
I love my community, I love my city, and I hate what's happening to it with people who frankly aren't from here coming in and telling us who should be here. And when it comes down to loving my neighbor, I'm just going to love my neighbor.
Here's ICE riding through our neighborhoods, destroying families, destroying businesses, tearing our communities apart, and they're not being held accountable. And that's why we're here. We're out here to demonstrate, to try to hold them accountable.
Okay, fine. But that's not what really that is. That is an open border. We don't want any law enforcement to confront undocumented migrants. We don't want it. You let them in, they do what they want. That's what these people stand for, but they're never honest about it. That shouldn't be a surprise. 75 million people voted for Kamala Harris, who supported President Biden's open border policy and didn't want any law enforcement against people, foreign nationals, who came into the country illegally. Kamala Harris wouldn't have done anything. Would have continued on the open border and let people just wave on it. Okay? 75 million Americans voted for her. A lot of folks. So of course you're going to have that. Now, the 8 states in open rebellion are these: California, Oregon, Washington State, Colorado, Minnesota, Illinois, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. New York and Vermont are right on the edge there. I don't have them on there because there's a dialogue, at least, going on with Washington, but you can put them on there. And when you have 10 states, it's basically telling the federal government, we're not going to obey your law. You have what they had before the Civil War. It's exactly the same thing. And I make the point in the column that from 1830 to 1860, 30 years, Southern states said, we're not going to obey whatever you say. And we're not just talking slavery, we're talking tariffs, we're talking almost everything. Andrew Jackson slapped them down. Okay? But then we had a series of weak presidents like Franklin Pierce and James Buchanan who let the South rise in ferocity. And then we had the Civil War. That was a rebellion against the federal government. Only other time in our history we've seen this was during the Vietnam War. But that was a populist uprising. Started out ideological, but then the war got out of control because of Lyndon Johnson's incompetency and deceit. And the American people, and that just cut across almost every barrier, said enough of this. And the demonstrations happened. And violence happened. Kent State, National Guard, and a lot of other areas. Now, the federal government at this point has a couple of obligations. Has to enforce the law. Has to. But they can de-escalate violent confrontations. So if ICE agents see that there's a person like Ms. Good impeding their investigation with an automobile, the vehicle, then you de-escalate that. You arrest her later, which they could have done easily. All right? You don't up it, because if there's a lot more violence, then the Trump administration is going to lose the country. It's going to. You got to de-escalate in any kind of potential violent situation. Now, that doesn't mean if the ICE agents are attacked that they can't fight back. They should fight back. I'm not saying that. But if you can lessen potential violence, you have to do that. And that's not just me saying it, that's every law enforcement agency in the country has that in their manual. Okay, if you don't have to use lethal force, you don't. Get it later. Do it later. Now, that's number one. Number two, 77 million Americans voted for Donald Trump. And that vote needs to be respected. It's not respected by the left. Okay, it's not. And it's probably a vice versa on that too. But when 77 million Americans say we want immigration law enforced, you got to enforce it. So the Trump administration is not doing anything wrong theoretically. Okay? But the ICE commanders have got to know that there's a volatile situation. Because if it gets worse, the Democrats are going to win the midterms. And they're making their stand not on the economy now, because the economy is pretty good. They're making their stand on this. This is the hill they're standing on. Illegal immigration. I think that's foolish. I believe most Americans see this Minnesota stuff for what it is. A provocation of the federal government, a rebellion against social order. I believe most of us see that. And the Democratic Party is standing opposed to that. It's going to hurt them, particularly because it's a weak party with no leader. But if you are calling ICE Gestapo and you are supporting open borders and no supervision of foreign nationals, and you won't even cooperate in the 10 states that I mentioned with criminal migrant investigations, you wouldn't even cooperate then, Americans are going to walk away from you, in my opinion. Summing up, the federal government has to enforce immigration law, but it has to be done a little bit differently now. Situation is just too volatile. We don't want dead people. Yeah. But we do want people held accountable. And that's a memo. When you're buried in credit card and loan debt, it's easy to put it off and say, I'll deal with it later. But here's the thing. Done with Debt has a little known strategy that can dramatically reduce or even erase what you owe. They will aggressively engage your lenders because they know rich credit card and loan companies are doing year-end accounting and cutting deals to clear debt fast, meaning you need to start with Done with Debt right now. They can help end your debt fast without bankruptcy or loans. In fact, most clients have more money in their pocket the first month. So get started while you still have time. Go to donewithdebt.com. Talk with one of their specialists for free. Visit donewithdebt.com, donewithdebt.com. All right, new data. The first quarter of the year, fiscal year, is for the federal government, is October, November, and December. Past. All right, so according to Customs and Border Protection, it's the lowest intrusion of the southern border ever. All right, border crossings are down 95% from Biden. So 91,000 were apprehended in 3 months at the border under Trump 2. Look at these stats under Biden. Okay, fiscal year, first quarter 2023, 865,000. Fiscal year, first quarter 2024, 988, almost a million. And then the last year, because they were running to try to get reelected, it's almost 400,000. And now that's down to 91. So obviously the Republican Party and Trump has done a good job in stopping that flow. But remember, the Democrats don't want to stop it. They don't want to stop it. That's the key to all analysis. Okay, let's go over to Greenland. So I did talk to President Trump briefly on Friday. I kind of feel sorry for the guy, but he creates a lot of his own mayhem. So I don't think U.S. forces are going to invade Greenland. I'll go right up top, say it. It would be a disaster, an absolute disaster if that happens for the Trump administration and for the United States. Because NATO would fall apart. Putin would win. Remember, Putin's rationale to go into Ukraine was Russian national security. We need this territory because NATO's going to attack us. Not a bunch of garbage. But that was his rationale. Now, Trump's rationale is we need Greenland to protect us against Russia and China. There's some truth to that. We only have one military base on that island. We should have about 10. Because the ships, submarines, all kinds of stuff, they're coming down from the Arctic Ocean past Greenland. But we can make a deal. I'm thoroughly convinced about that. Remember Panama a year ago? I wrote about this in a message of the day on BillO'Reilly.com. And I was in a cabinet meeting with the president, and he's going, I'm going to, I said, no, you don't have to do that. And they worked it out. You haven't heard Panama in a year. I think that's what will happen to Greenland. I hope it happens, because if the U.S. military were to go into Greenland, Democrats would win the midterms. Big. Big. Only 9% of Americans support a military incursion into Greenland. Let me back it up. Quinnipiac poll. All right. Would you support or oppose the United States trying to buy Greenland? Support 37, oppose 55, don't know 8. Would you support military force? Support 9. Oh, geez. Oppose 86, don't know 6. And the president is a smart guy. He knows all that. I don't think he's going. I think he's saber rattling to make the best deal he can make. I think that deal will happen. May even happen this week at Davos, Switzerland, where the president's going over with a big U.S. contingent. Talk to the financial pinheads. Maybe they make a deal over there. I hope so. Let's get another point of view of this. Joining us from Washington is Hugo Gurdon. He's the editor-in-chief of the Washington Examiner newspaper. In my analysis, did I say anything that you quibble with, Mr. Gurdon?
No, I don't quibble with it at all. I completely agree that strategically it's important for the United States to have a very strong military presence in the Arctic and in northern Greenland. It's important for the Golden Dome. It's important for the protection of the Arctic, important for the protection of northern Europe. But the president seems to me to be going about it in precisely the wrong way. And Denmark has already said, has made it perfectly plain that it's willing to make a deal. So, we don't want to let our enemies operate in the Western Hemisphere. We basically made sure of that down in Venezuela, but we don't say we've got to own Venezuela. We can make the deal with Denmark. And, one of the ironies, I think, is, Bill, that in many circumstances, the president is saying the Europeans should do more for their own defense. Well, here's a perfect opportunity to get a NATO ally to do more for its own defense by saying, right, we're going to strike a deal. The United States can have a 50-year lease or a 99-year lease for set up military operations in the northern Arctic, on the north coast of Greenland, take on the Russian nuclear-powered icebreakers and the Chinese moving into that area. It's something that they should be doing. And today's news about the exchange with the governments of Finland and Norway was just extraordinary. And
I don't believe that. I got to tell you, maybe it's true, but President Trump, what he likes to do, and I'm sure you know this, is that he likes to throw the hand grenade in and it blows up. And then from that swirl of smoke and everything, then he walks in and gets the best possible deal. So he likes to keep people on edge, and he likes to say things that are provocative, and he likes to have everybody on edge. And then he comes in, and it's like Mighty Mouse. Here I come to save the day. And he almost does it every time.
Yeah, look, I think that there's truth in that, and it's one of the cautions that one needs when considering what Trump is doing. He will go in there and, create a kind of mayhem or extraordinary circumstances in which everybody's hair is on fire. And then when they settle for 60% of what he's asked for, or they rush to make a deal, he's actually getting what he originally intended to get.
Right.
So I completely agree with that. But it doesn't mean to say that any method of getting there is really an acceptable or a good one. I think
that's a good point. I think what he's got now is all of Europe hates him.
Right.
Do we really want all of Europe hating us?
No, we don't.
No. So, but 3 weeks from now, all of Europe might like us again because he'll do something that would benefit them. I don't know. But I understand the overkill. But that's what he's always done. I mean, if you read my book, The United States of Trump, I mean, every business deal, every political deal. Remember the first debate when he had the 9 guys lined up on a stage and he just blew them up? Right. Boring Jeb and lying Ted, and people are shocked. And it works for him. And so it's hard when I'm speaking with the president. I'm always respectful, no matter what president it is. Right. I can't say, well, all right. He can say, look, it's been successful for me my whole career. And that's where his mindset is.
Yeah, he will actually sometimes prevent people who are kind of, broadly speaking, supportive of him from explaining away or trying to put into context. And I mean, right back when he accused President Obama of starting ISIS, and people would say, oh, what he means is that he was creating the circumstances in which ISIS could start the Islamic State, etc. And he said, no, Obama started it. He says deliberately outrageous things, and indeed they are outrageous. And then you're left to calculate later, well, okay, he got what we wanted. He got things for the United States. He shocked people in the way that he did it. What is the price that we paid for getting the thing that we want?
Yeah,
and that is
that's a legitimate question. I mean, there's certainly unease throughout the world. Now, we go over to Iran, and that's a situation where There are a lot of different nations involved. Saudi Arabia, a big player, not very vocal on it, but they're big, and Trump listens to them. What do you think is going to happen there? Any idea?
Look, I think there's quite a high likelihood, if not very, very soon, but pretty high likelihood of American military involvement over there. I don't know. There's not a lot of information that comes out about exactly what the state of protests are, but they seem to have died down. Obviously, thousands of people have been murdered by the regime. But I think that, there are reports of former members of the government there being arrested by the Republican Guards for having, contact with the Shah or the successor outside the United States, and there are defections, diplomatic defections. They don't necessarily count for very much, but they might be straws in the wind. I think a lot of people would say, and I think I agree with it, this regime is on its last legs. It cannot stay in power, even with the repressive methods that it uses, for that much longer. But how much that much longer is a difficult question. It seems to me that the United States was probably caught without the proper military assets in the area. That's not a surprise. There was a huge deployment, obviously, over in Venezuela, and there's a carrier group that's coming from the South China Sea. And by the time it gets there, the current wave of protests might be flattened. But I think that your viewers should probably expect more turbulence and ultimately the United States getting involved, not with troops on the ground, of course, but with things like cutting off Republican Guard communications. They know the United States has proved itself extremely good at disrupting the ability of...
Yeah, and they'll flatten the Revolutionary Guard headquarters. That's what I think will happen. But it's all a matter of what was put forth by the Gulf states was if you go in now, then the Ayatollah is going to use that as a religious fundamentalism turn. Or look at the great Satan's trying to destroy all of us. And so it wasn't a right time to do it, which I think has some merit to it. I know the president would like to take them out, but they want to do it surgically. So just summing up, I don't believe that the U.S. is going to put military into Greenland unless there's a treaty signed. Do you concur with that?
Oh, I do. I concur. I don't think that they're going to do it, and it would be absolute disaster if they did.
Right. That would just ruin the whole Trump administration. All right, Mr. Godin, thanks very much for helping us out on a holiday. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
The cost of everything still rising, and many of us are relying on credit cards to cover essentials. If that debt is piling up, you're not alone. Americans now owe more than $1 trillion in credit card debt. You may have thought about calling American Financing, but hesitated because you don't want to lose your low mortgage rate. Well, good news, they created the Smart Equity Loan. It lets you tap into your home's equity without touching your current mortgage. Unlike a home equity line of credit, this loan has a fixed interest rate and one predictable monthly payment. No upfront or hidden fees. It only takes 10 minutes to get started, so please call 888-462-9557 or visit americanfinancing.net/bill. You've heard me talk about All Family Pharmacy before, and I'll keep talking about them because they are truly doing things right. They're fast, reliable, and they care about getting people the meds they need without all the runaround. When you don't want to wait in line and would rather get your meds delivered to your door, you need All Family Pharmacy. When everyone around you is sick and you want to be prepared, you need All Family Pharmacy. And when your doctor says they will not prescribe ivermectin, you need All Family Pharmacy. They've got everything: antibiotics, antivirals, Tamiflu, blood pressure meds, more. Order online. Once approved by the doctors, your medication ships straight to your door. Be prepared for whatever this new year brings. Please visit allfamilypharmacy.com/bill. Use the code BILL10 to save 10%. All right, here is a final thought of the day. So we do, I don't know, probably hundreds of concierge requests a week. Concierge membership, BillO'Reilly.com. You get a special email. You got a problem, you want more information, whatever you want, we'll try to make your life better. And a lot of times we need more information from people writing in. So I'm getting hosed by this one and they're doing this to me. And the breakdown is that a lot of people, when we say, okay, we're ready to go, we're ready to help you, send the names and the numbers of the people you've been dealing with who are giving you a hard time. And we'll contact them. About 30% don't. They just don't reply to us. It's so strange. You know, the old adage is the Lord helps those who help themselves. More information you can compile about people doing the wrong thing to you or your family, the easier it is for us to correct that wrong. Thank you for watching and listening to the No Spin News. See you tomorrow. Thank you for watching. To view full episodes of the No Spin News anytime, sign up to become a BillO'Reilly.com premium or concierge member today.